I think it's there. There you are. All right. So today we have a very special guest. I've been looking forward to this for some time, ever since I met Laurel Ballyeat-Morrison. I was super impressed. She is clearly bright, as you will see, and sharp as a tack, but also deeply warm, and just carries a wisdom that you acquire through life. And so, you know, literally from the first time I met her, I was like, I got to get her here to teach Crosswalk. And so I've been trying to get a female voice whenever we'd land on a female character. And how about that? On International Women's Day, we got 2 women we're looking at being taught by an exceptional woman. So without further ado, please welcome Laurel Ballyeat-Morrison.
Thank you so much, Pete, for that warm welcome. I was here last Sunday, sitting right over there, and appreciated the conversations that I had at that table, and for just the good time that I've had with you so far. Looking forward to sharing what I've gleaned from the book of Ruth. Couldn't wait for that one. Famine, immigration, death. These are the crises that Ruth and Naomi face in this story. We all go through crises in life, and I shared in the first service that 2019 was a horrible year for me. Started out in January, my oldest daughter miscarried. March, my mother-in-law died. June, my sister-in-law died. August 2nd, my dear auntie died. 2 days later, my best friend died. In between was my sister-in-law's memorial service between those 2 deaths. And my mentor died in November. So it was a really, really hard year. And I'm wondering about you. What are some of the losses? What are some of the crises that that you all are dealing with? Does anybody feel brave and want to share? Could be something little, something big. Okay, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Every group is different. Some of you have lost health. Some of you have lost spouses. Some of you have retired, and even though that's a good thing, you're kind of trying at a loss for what to do with your time. Some of you have experienced loss with the fires that you dealt with a few years ago. So loss is a part of our everyday experience and life. And so let's dig into the story here. This story takes place in the time of the Judges, which you have been studying. So we're right in that time frame. And it starts with Naomi, the older woman. She and her husband Elimelech are living in Judah, in Bethlehem, and they have a famine. And I'm honestly admitting that I didn't realize that that food scarcity is not only a problem around the world, but it's here in our backyard. 1 in 9 people around the globe do not have enough food to eat on a regular basis, and they also don't have enough nutrition to sustain a healthy life. As many as 18% of the children in Napa County alone face food scarcity. So good on you for having a food pantry and for getting out there with your bags and doing your part to make Jesus known and be the bread of life. So it's a good job on that. And then I just want to take a moment to thank you also for supporting Deborah's house in Tijuana. I spent a week there a couple years ago on a mission trip, and my life was really impacted significantly, seeing those women who were so downtrodden discover a new life in Jesus. So thank you for being a part of that work. Well, back to the story. So there's a famine going on in Judah, and Naomi and her husband Elimelech with their 2 sons decide to leave and go east across the wilderness of Judah, around the Dead Sea to Moab. There, the sons, Mahlon and Chilion, marry Moabite women, so they are Gentiles. Then Elimelech dies. And then, we don't know the reasons, but over the course of time, Mahlon and Chilion also die. So there are these 3 women coping with the loss of their husbands. And that's hard enough, but I think in the economy of those days, it was devastating for them. They had very little social status once their husbands died. And I know for myself, if I lost my husband Jim here and our 2 daughters at the same time or around the same time, that would be devastating for me. I would just be crying and carrying on all the time. So I think this story gives us an opportunity to look at loss and how we face loss and how we grieve, ways to cope. And so let's look at, there's healthy ways to cope, and then there's unhealthy ways to cope. So let's start with the healthy ways. We see this mostly from Naomi, because she gives voice to her sorrow in a variety of ways, especially in the first chapter. She prays and she calls out to God. She shares her grief. She shares her feelings. She cries. She's unhappy. She wonders what is going on. And the other thing is to honestly express our feelings. It's not just enough to talk to God and to pray, but to tell our friends, to tell people that we know, people that we care about. Don't be in denial, but let people know what it is that you're going through. Be honest with yourself and with them about what you're really, really feeling. And one of the things that I discovered about grief is you just never know. You just never know what's gonna be a trigger. We were watching Anne with an E, and it was Easter, and all of a sudden I remembered, Easter. Easter was the last time that my sister-in-law was at our house, and I started to get teary watching, this show. So you just never know. And that relates to my next step, my next point, which I didn't put on there, but I would if I could. Practice good self-care. Practice good self-care. Grief takes a lot of energy. It takes time. You have to clear your schedule to go to memorial services, to write in your journal, to pray, to really reflect on the difference that person has meant to you. So give yourself time, rest, cut out some things in your schedule if you need to. Take bereavement leave at work if that's an option for you. I strongly encourage you to do that. And then there's some unhealthy ways to cope with grief. In 1:13, Naomi laments, "No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." So here she's comparing herself to her daughters. I'm worse off than you. And don't we do that? It's not healthy. It's not good. There's always going to be somebody who's better off than we are, and there's always going to be somebody who's going to be having it more difficult than we are. So let's recognize that everyone's situation is unique. In 1:19-21, we know that her name, Naomi, means pleasant one. But she says to everyone, "Call me no longer Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Lord Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." And Mara means bitterness. "I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity on me?" So here I think this is where Naomi starts sliding into what I call the undertow of grief, where you get caught into it and you're not sure if you can swim out of it. And so She's, I already said that one. She's thinking negatively. She's focusing on the negatives and her grief. She's forgetting to count her blessings. She's maximizing her problems and her grief, and she's minimizing her blessings. She saw her life with her husband and her 2 sons as full. You know, the glass was full. And now she's just saying it's empty. She's not recognizing that it's half full or partially full. She has her daughter-in-law, Ruth, as part of her life. So let's not follow her example and be so black and white in our thinking. We need to see the fullness of our life's glass. We also judge God. She says she thinks that God is punishing her, is dealing harshly with her. And of course it hurts to lose a loved one, but God is not trying to make things worse for her necessarily. God is always redeeming our lives and trying to work in those difficult situations. And then the other thing she does is she makes a calamity. She makes a catastrophe out of the situation. The Lord Almighty has brought calamity on me. You know, it's like, I can't do anything else. I'm at the end of the line. Life is over. And that kind of thinking gets us really, really stuck. So let's not go there. She forgets that God loves her, that God does have a plan and a purpose for her and a future as well. So let's make our faith stronger than our feelings of anger or sadness or doubt. And let's sow seeds of hope in times of uncertainty and crisis, trusting that God is working God's purposes out in our life. I really was inspired by this quote. It comes from a book called The Story of Ruth by Joan Chittister, and I'll read it for you. Loss, once reckoned, once absorbed, is a precious gift. No, I cannot be what I was before, but I can be, I must be, something new, someone new. There is more of God in me, I discover, in emptiness than I have ever known in what I once took to be fullness. There's a lot in there, and that quote is in the reflection questions in your bulletin, so you can reflect on it later. My sister-in-law and I were quite close. We were only 9 weeks apart in age. She lived a half an hour away from me across the San Francisco Bay. We shopped together, we cooked together, we played together, we hiked together, we shared family holidays together, we traveled together. A few years ago, she contracted a rare GI cancer, and it was terminal. It was stage 4 pretty much by the time that they caught it. So my husband and I walked with her and my brother-in-law through this really, really difficult season. And she was in and out of the hospital, in and out of the hospital. And part of my grief was having the courage to tell her how much I was going to miss her and how hard it was. You know, I decided to not wait and spend all of my tears after she was gone. And we had some very precious times of crying together and grieving together. It did take a lot of courage for me. But the hardest thing for me about my relationship with my one and only sister-in-law is that she did not know God. She did not know Jesus. And over the course of the 35 years that I knew her, I did everything that I could to show his love, to show it in action, giving her gifts, celebrating special birthdays in special ways, but most of all telling her that my love for her was just a little fraction of God's love for her. And I told her about heaven and what I imagined that it would be like, and so forth. So my grief in losing her was compounded by the fact that when she died, I didn't have the assurance that she had said yes to God, that she had said yes to Jesus and accepted his unconditional love. So at the end of her memorial service, I just collapsed into the arms of my cousin, and my grief really got carried away from me. But God is always in the healing and redeeming business. And a few days after her memorial service and a time of prayer, the Lord reassured me that I had done everything that he had asked me to do, that I had done what he wanted me to do. I had visited her when he wanted me to visit her. Up until the day before she died, he was very insistent that I go see her on June 6th, and she died the next day. So I have that consolation from the Lord that I was faithful, and he blessed me in just knowing that much. And so he reminded me, as this story reminds all of us, that God gives us hope and love and care, even in the most difficult circumstances. Well, the good part about this story, one of the many good things about it, is that Naomi doesn't get stuck. She doesn't say, okay, I'm a foreigner, I'm a widow, I'm destined for poverty. She says, I've got some options here. She hears that in Bethlehem, the famine is over. And Bethlehem, once again, is living up to its name, which means house of bread. So she says, I'm going to go back to Judah. I'm going back to my homeland. I have hope and a future there. So she doesn't give up, and she knows this truth, that God never gives up on his children, right? God never gives up on his children, and because of that, we should not give up on God. So the three women, Naomi goes to them and says, I'm going back to Judah. You need to stay with your family. I'll be okay. It'll be all right. And the women kiss, and they cry, and they kiss, and they cry. And Orpah decides, okay, I'm staying home. I'm going back to mom and dad. But Ruth gives this famous line in Scripture and says to Naomi, do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. So she loves Naomi to death. She makes this covenant commitment to her that is used in marriage ceremonies quite a bit, and promises to be with her to the end, leaves her homeland, leaves her parents, and chooses to be faithful to her and faithful to her God. So they travel back to Bethlehem, and Orpah walks off the page. Okay. So I was thinking, how come we don't hear about Ruth's grief? And I don't know. What we see about Ruth's grief is that even though she probably feels it, she decides to take action. She's not going to just mope around. She's not going to sleep all day. She gets up, she goes out early in the morning, and she starts gleaning in the field. She starts picking up the remaining seeds of grain that the reapers have either missed or dropped, and she gets enough food for herself and for Naomi to live on. She sows seeds of hope, and she cultivates her opportunities. And then what happens is really great, because there's several wonders that happen in this part of the story. And a wonder is something that only God can do. There's the wonder, so let's notice the God moments here. The first one is place. She just happens to land in the field of Boaz. He's a rich man in Bethlehem. She also, there's the timing of the two of them meeting. He just happens to show up from town, and he asks about Ruth. Who is this young woman? What's she about? Where did she come from? And the reapers explain, she's the daughter-in-law of Naomi. She's from Moab. And they say, she's been here since the crack of dawn, and she has been working without a rest. And he's quite impressed that she's working so hard, and he goes and he meets her. He makes sure that she stays with the women. He tells her that he's going to make sure that the guys don't bother her. Stay in this field. Here's the bread. Here's the drinks. He makes sure that she's okay. Well, she's kind of curious, and she's really humbled, and she gets down at Boaz's feet. And she says, why? Why have I found favor in your sight when I'm a foreigner? She recognizes she's an outsider. She doesn't feel like she has any opportunity, any freedom to be deserving of such treatment. She feels less than the others. But Boaz favors her because she's been loyal to Naomi, and he sees how hard she's working, and he blesses her for the fact that she has left her parents and her homeland and chosen to follow the God of Israel. So his blessing goes like this. May the Lord reward you. This is in 2:12 if you like to find the verses. May the Lord reward you for your deeds. May you have full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. So he blesses her. She's expecting, maybe something else, but he blesses her, and she's so grateful. And her question kind of grabbed me, because it made me realize that sometimes when I want something good to happen, and I ask God for it, and then when I get it, I'm a little surprised, or I start questioning God, like, really? Can I trust this? Is it really okay? Or I feel like I'm undeserving in some ways, and I start grilling God for, well, what's the purpose of this? And, is this going to keep going, or is this just a little, appetizer, or what? So let's be grateful. Let's be gracious when we have an intention of seeking favor, and God actually gives it to us. So let's apply this to our own lives. Let's notice the ways that God is working in our lives. So using our eyes, our ears, our bodies, our hearts to notice the things that God is doing. And these were some of the things that I thought this story suggests. The place, the people, the timing, the intention of our hearts. So my questions, and these are also found in your bulletin insert. How is God active in your work? How is God active in your area of service or ministry? What is God doing? What do you see God doing? Timing. Is there unusual timing or linkage of times in your life? People. Are there specific people with whom God is working and speaking? I had a pastor say to me at the clergy gathering on Thursday, one of the reasons why I come to this group, he said, is because you and a couple of other people, I specifically am here to learn from you. Wow, that was a blessing. So I thought, okay, God is definitely working something here between us. Intention. If you seek favor, do you question God when you get it? Or can you be gracious and just accept it? Well, I had kind of a wonder in January. I went to a retreat, and before the retreat began, I was sitting in the lobby of Sidon Conference Center, just sitting there, and next to me, I met Rose, and I said, "Oh, Rose, my middle name is Rose." We started talking about the topic of the theme of the retreat. I'm talking about joy, she said. I'm talking about joy because I need joy. Last year was a really hard year for me. I said, yeah, last year was a really hard year for me too. I said, how did your life go? Well, my daughter suffered a miscarriage. My best friend died. Really? I was really surprised. Only God could have orchestrated me meeting this colleague who had suffered 2 great losses as I had. And so we got to know each other and had a really good couple of days together. So you just never know how God's going to work. Be on the lookout for those wonders and be grateful and see how God is working through them. So the story continues. And this slide is rather amusing. Here we see Naomi, the older woman, and Ruth talking. And I think that Naomi's strength is in her faith. I believe she's really, even though she made all these laments and kind of complaints and did get carried away with her grief and talk about her bitterness, I still think she was a very faithful and devout woman. And I believe she was praying, and I believe she was saying, God, how can I help Ruth have a life, get a life? And I think the Lord reveals to her, Boaz. Boaz is the one. Boaz is the one. Well, the way it works back then, they had this law called the Levirate Law. And if a woman of childbearing age died, she had to marry the next of kin. The next of kin in this case would have been Mahlon's brother Chilion, but he died also, right? And then they were left back buried in Moab, and we were now back to Judah. So Ruth had to marry somebody in Naomi's family line. It turns out that Boaz was in the family line. So Naomi is thinking, and she gets to be matchmaker, and this is, she says, okay, I want you to, wash up, put on your best perfume. I want you to go to the threshing floor. This is where Boaz has been working. And he stays there at night to protect the grain. So apparently it was valuable enough that they wanted to make sure that nobody walked off with it. So Naomi says, I need to seek some security for you. So she was supposed to go to the threshing floor, where a woman was not supposed to be, take that risk. So here's some things I don't understand about this dating game. Naomi cannot tell Boaz, Ruth is available. She would make you a really good wife. Ruth can't say to Boaz, I baked you a cake, and you seem pretty nice. I'd like to consider a long-term relationship with you. She can't do that. Instead, she has to sneak into the threshing floor. She waits until he's eaten, gone to sleep. She lies down on the cold, hard floor at his dirty, stinky feet. Clearly, she is not the bachelorette with lots of choices. So, whoopsie, did I go the wrong way? Ah, I missed something. What did I miss? Yes, I pressed too hard. Okay, so at midnight, so why did Ruth leave Boaz's feet uncovered? Because in the middle of the night, he'd be cold, right? So he'd reach down and he'd want to fix his cloak or whatever, and that's when he discovers Ruth. He's startled. Who are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? She says, I'm Ruth. I'm Ruth. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin. Now that's a very unromantic way of saying, you're next in line and I'd be open to marrying you. He's excited. He's been a bachelor and he's got a young woman who's hardworking, loyal to her mother-in-law, a loyal worker in the field, and she's interested in him. And so he says, may you be blessed by the Lord. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. I will do for you all that you ask, for all of my people know that you are a worthy woman. So her loyalty to him rates way above her loyalty to Naomi in his book. And he's pretty happy that this good woman is open to being his wife. So the plot thickens, and Boaz tells her to, go back to sleep, but she has to get up before it's light because it would be scandalous if they were discovered in the threshing floor, just the two of them, without any chaperone. So the next day, Boaz goes into town, and he has a God moment. One of the first people that he sees is the actual first next of kin. And he says, hey, buddy, well, here's the deal. You know about Ruth, and Naomi is selling the property that Elimelech had, and whoever buys the property gets the hand of Ruth in marriage. You're first up to be the kinsman redeemer. And he says, first he says yes to the property, but then he finds out about Ruth and says, oh, no, can't do that. Can't do that. That'll mess up my inheritance. So the first in line guy takes off his sandal and gives it to Boaz. And that's a sign that he is released from the commitment and the obligation, and gives Boaz the opportunity to take Ruth to be his wife. Well, as Pastor Pete said, today is International Women's Day, and so I started thinking, well, okay, so what would Ruth do today? International Women's Day is dedicated to the celebrating the social, cultural, economic, and political contributions of women around the globe. And it's also a day dedicated to advocacy for women in the workplace. So I'm thinking that today Ruth might go to Boaz and say, well, I've been working in the field, and you know how hard a worker I am. I'd really like to be a partner in this agribusiness, in this family business, and I would like to be a manager. I'd like to work, be responsible for the welfare of the workers. So that's my fear. That's my theory of what might happen today. Marriage may or may not be an option for her. We can sow seeds of hope, and we can discern God's direction in difficult circumstances. So let's look at some of the ways that we can discern God's direction. The first one, is kind of obvious, but it's important, and that is to trust God. To trust God that God knows exactly what we need when we need it. And that God is working his purposes out, even if we don't understand them. God is working all things together for his good. I think Naomi's counsel to Ruth shows us how important it is to listen to godly people. So your friends, your prayer partners, your pastor, your church staff, your church leaders, your therapists, your life coaches, if they know God and they know you, they may have some really good counsel for you. And I urge you to consider listening to them. Stretch yourself. Let yourself be stretched out of your comfort zone. We cannot follow Jesus, go with God, and stay exactly where we are and never move. It's just one of those facts of life. And some of us have a broader comfort zone than others, but God calls all of us at times to step out of it. Pete asked me in an email in the middle of the week, did I want him to make 1 or 2 PowerPoint slides for this presentation, or was I going to bring PowerPoint? And honestly, it's been a while since I've preached with PowerPoint. And I prayed, oh Lord, do I really have to do this? Yes, you really have to do this. And then I came last Sunday and I was like, oh my gosh. And, and I'm used to a pulpit, and I got a table, and it's like, do I have to sit on the stool? No, I don't have to sit on the stool. And I went through this whole thing, and then I spoke in the first service, and then he said, now you can't, Pete coached me, you can't go outside of this circle because you're on videotape. I was like, videotape? I can't remember the last time I was videotaped giving a message. So I stepped out of my comfort zone, and here I am. So God gives us hope, love, and care, even in difficult times. So I told you about Rose, and I'm going to go back to my seat here and remember sitting with her in several different places at Redwood Glen. We ate lunch together, and we sat next to each other. We played silly games on Monday night together with these antlers from Christmas. We had a lot of laughs and a lot of good times together. At the end of the 2 days of retreat, we looked at each other and said, let's stay in touch. Let's be friends. And so we exchanged emails. We had looked at each other's pictures, and I learned that her daughter was pregnant once again, is expecting a baby this month, so I've been knitting baby booties and going to send them off to her. So God is good. And I said to her, I can't replace my best friend, but God can always give us new friends. And we hugged each other, and that was a sweet moment, and we're enjoying the friendship that we had that got started in a God moment based on some loss that each of us had experienced. So be open to those God moments. Well, this story ends very, very happily. Ruth and Boaz get married. Naomi is overjoyed. She gets to be the grandma and help raise little Obed. The friends at the wedding say to Naomi, I love this, "Blessed be the Lord. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age." So when we feel like all hope is gone, God will restore us, and God will nourish us on into our old age. So Obed becomes the father of Jesse. Jesse is the father of David. And King David, of course, is in the line of Jesus. So Ruth is one of the few women mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. So she, a Gentile woman from Moab, becomes one of the ancestors of Jesus, the Messiah. So we're going to go through crises. We're going to face loss, and it's going to be hard. But God is always at work, and God works in amazing ways in ways that we can't see, but sometimes he lets us have a peek at what those are, and he uses people and circumstances to work his will and his way. So let's be open. Let's be looking. Let's be trusting him. Let's seek the counsel of people that we trust and have godly advice. And let's let him stretch us out of our comfort zone. Because the truth is, when we sow seeds of hope, we will reap a harvest of blessings. Let's pray. God, we praise you for your goodness, your grace, your mercy, your loyalty to us, your great, deep love for us. We confess that we don't always understand your ways, but we know that you are good, and we do trust that you are working all things together for good. I pray for those here who are hurting, who are struggling, who have more questions than faith. I thank you that you will answer them in your timing. Your ways are perfect, and you are always on time. I pray that you would give us eyes to see you, and ears to hear you, and hearts to know you. I pray that you would continue to enable us to listen to those who are speaking into our lives, and that we would trust you most of all, but also develop trust in them as well. And when we experience things that are wondrous and joyous, may we always turn back and give you the highest praise. We say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Amen.
Hey, please help me celebrate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. We hope you had a great experience, and we will see you next week. See ya.